To begin an invoice, to get an invoice number, hit Save. On the right hand side will be the information on the client. This is the person that's going to receive the invoice. Have the date, invoice number, invoice terms. These are items you have previously typed, or you can type your terms in here. Case is this case here, and then we enter the detail. You can put the details by date, or you can just go right into the quantity and then tab to the rate. And if the rate's not already in here, it will ask you to, you can type in your own rate and it will save it. Description. If you want to put in more details on the description, click the button to the right. And it totals it here. If it's taxable, check that off and then select the rate or enter the rate there. So you can see down here it's already totaled up $400. Customer message. You can type it in or select something you've already put in before. Internal memo. This is just notes for internally. This won't show on their invoice. Once you have the invoice ready, go up to the action list, select preview invoice, or print it directly to the printer, or you can email the invoice to your client. It will attach the invoice as a PDF and address the invoice to your client. From that point, you can then enter additional information and send the email. It will open your default email program that's installed on your computer. You can print all the invoices. You can combine all the invoices that are outstanding on this particular client into one invoice. You can also merge expenses to invoice from the action list, and the invoice combo options are all the combo boxes that are on here that you can edit the entries that are in here. I'm going to preview the invoice. This video is to show you how to create an invoice within a case. On the case screen, click Invoice. And to explain, by default, the invoice will be addressed to the client, the main client or contact that is assigned to the case. You can change this by selecting a different client or contact that would receive the invoice for this particular case. But by default, it's the main contact assigned to the case. Also, other things to note on the invoice section. Select an invoice, either company letterhead or basic letterhead. Selecting company letterhead, and then when you go to preview the invoice or print the invoice, will show the custom letterhead that came with your program when you purchased it, which would be your custom logo and letterhead. Selecting basic letterhead would use the detail information out of the user settings, including your company name, address, and making a letterhead which would then go into the invoice letterhead. Just uses the company name and address. If you choose to delete an invoice, go to the bottom, click delete, and your invoice will be deleted. As you notice, once you delete the invoice or back on a new one, the action list is dimmed out. This will be dimmed out until there's an invoice number present. You need to hit save. This will generate a new invoice number, and then the action list is unlocked. Your letterhead will be across the top. This is a basic letterhead format. Yours may contain your actual logo across the top or the bottom. Information, the client, case information, invoice number, client file number, case number, then the details here. As you can see, the description, the additional details is underneath the line item. Tax ID number is also located on the invoice. To print this, you just right click, hit print. When you're done, you can close it, or you can directly print by just selecting print invoice. Email invoice, I'll show you what that looks like. It addresses it to the client, Subject puts the invoice in here. Also puts the amount of the invoice and your signature line. This portion of the video shows you how to apply a payment to an invoice. Once you're in the invoice on the particular case, on the top left, click Payments. Then put in a date and then the payment amount. You can also enter the method and if it's a credit card number or check number, expiration date. You can also mark off if it was a retainer or not. Once the payment is made, the payment will be applied to the invoice as shown here. Total due is 0. This video shows you how to use the expenses that are entered by either administrators through the CasePoint software or expenses that are received from employees through the website. When a case in the updates, go to the action list and select Enter View Daily Case Expenses. Now this particular expense is linked to the update for Tom Ball. I'm going to go ahead and enter his expenses, showing you how an administrator can enter the expenses on an investigator. 8 hours, and I'm going to put in the rate that we bill at, the investigative company, and then the rate that the employee is getting paid. And I'm going to mark this as hours. I'm also going to put in the mileage. And then mark this as miles. This is used later when producing reports. It will then break up the hours and the miles. Once you've entered everything, hit back, and you're back on the update, and then go back again. We're back on the case information for this particular case. Now I'm going to go ahead and invoice this. I'm going to click the invoice. Once on an invoice, click Save, which will begin the invoice by giving an invoice number. I select the terms, and then in the details section here, I'm going to insert the expenses into the invoice. So go to the action list and select Merge Expenses to Invoice. There's 2 records to add to the invoice. I hit OK. And there's the 2 expense records we put in. It puts the rate in at the rate we bill at and the totals. So this invoice is ready to go. For example, if I try to merge expenses again, there's none. It's now marked those expenses as being invoiced. And this invoice is ready to send out to the client. If you have other items you want to put in the invoice, you can do that just as you normally would. And that will add it to the invoice. That concludes the video on merging expenses into the invoice. This video shows how to add a retainer to a case. So we're in the case information here. You go to the right side and click Invoice. And we're on a brand new invoice here. We're going to go ahead and hit Save. This will give you an invoice number. This is the invoice we'll work off of. And we're going to click Payments. And we're going to put in the date, or you can click the calendar to the right of the date field. I'm going to enter the retainer amount and the method. And you can add multiple items here, as many payments or retainers as you want. And then you can check off retainer. Go back to the invoice tab. You notice the payment or refund is $1,000. We don't have any charges on the case yet. There's two things you can do. You can either enter directly in the invoice, or you can merge your expenses right into the invoice, which will then subtract from the payment amount. I'm going to go ahead and enter directly into the invoice. I put in 8 hours at $65 an hour, and there's $480 left on the case. You can continue entering information. You don't have to finish it this time. You can come back later. Go back to the invoice. And then enter more details into the invoice. And you can actually date it too. And as you enter the detail items, it will then subtract it and tell you there's $155 left in the retainer.